Every evening at exactly 6:30, when the last student packed up their books and the hallways grew quiet, a woman in her late 50s would push open the back door of the Westbrook Academy of Music. Her name was Mei Lin, and for 11 years, she had been the invisible woman of this place. She carried the same blue bucket every night, the same mop with the wooden handle that had grown smooth from years of use, the same pair of worn sneakers that barely made a sound against the marble floors. Nobody noticed her come in. Nobody noticed her leave. And that was exactly how she preferred it. The academy was one of those fancy places where rich kids came to learn piano and violin and all the instruments that regular people only saw in movies. The building itself looked like something out of a dream. High ceilings with gold designs, crystal chandeliers that sparkled like frozen rain, paintings of famous composers lining the walls. And at the heart of it all, sitting on a polished wooden stage, was a grand piano so black and shiny it looked like a pool of still water. Mei Lin would always save that piano for last. She would clean the practice rooms first, picking up crumpled sheet music that students had tossed aside, wiping sticky fingerprints from doorknobs, emptying trash cans filled with energy drink cans and chip bags. Then she would move to the main hallway, mopping in long, slow strokes, working her way toward the recital hall like she was saving the best for the end. And maybe she was, because every night, after she finished wiping down the seats and sweeping the stage, she would stand in front of that piano and just look at it. Sometimes for a few seconds, sometimes for several minutes. Her reflection stared back at her from the glossy black surface. A tired woman with gray streaks in her hair and lines around her eyes that told the story of a hard life. But those eyes, if you looked closely, really closely, you would see something else in them. Something that did not match the mop in her hand or the cleaning uniform on her back. There was a fire in those eyes. A sadness, too. The kind of sadness that comes from losing something precious and never getting it back. Nobody at the academy knew anything about her. To them, she was just the cleaning lady, the one who came after hours, the one whose name they never bothered to learn. The professors would walk right past her without a glance. The students would leave their messes behind without a second thought, knowing someone would clean it up. Someone always did. But Mei Lin had a secret. A secret she had buried so deep inside herself that sometimes even she forgot it was there. 40 years ago, in a small apartment in Shanghai, a little girl had sat at an old upright piano with chipped keys and a sound that was slightly out of tune. Her mother stood behind her, guiding her tiny fingers to the right positions. The girl was only 5 years old, but something magical happened when she touched those keys. The notes that came out were not the clumsy sounds of a beginner. They were clear. By the time she was 8, that little girl was performing in front of audiences. By 12, she had been accepted into the Shanghai Conservatory of Music, one of the most respected music schools in all of China. The teachers there said she had a gift that came along once in a generation. Her fingers moved across the piano like they were dancing. Her heart poured into every note she played. That little girl was Mei Lin. She had spent her teenage years practicing 8 hours a day. Her dreams were bigger than the small apartment she lived in. She wanted to perform on the greatest stages in the world. She wanted to play for kings and presidents. She wanted to make people cry with the beauty of her music. But life does not always care about our dreams. When she was 19, everything changed. Political troubles swept through her country. Her father, a quiet man who taught literature at a local university, was accused of spreading dangerous ideas. One night, soldiers came to their door. Her father was taken away. She never saw him again. Her mother made a decision that broke both their hearts. Mei Lin still remembered that last night in Shanghai. She had sat at her piano, in the darkness, playing one final piece. Chopin, her favorite. The notes had floated through the empty apartment like ghosts. When she finished, she closed the lid gently, pressed her palm against the cool wood, and whispered, "Goodbye." She was 19 years old. She never played in public again. The journey to America was long and hard. Her mother worked 3 jobs to keep them alive. Mei Lin worked too, cleaning offices, washing dishes, whatever she could find. There was no time for music, no money for pianos, no room in their tiny shared apartment for anything except survival. Years passed. Her mother grew old and sick. Mei Lin took care of her until the very end, holding her hand as she took her last breath. After that, she was alone in a country that still felt foreign even after all those years. She moved from job to job, city to city, always searching for something she could not name. And then, 11 years ago, she saw a help-wanted sign outside the Westbrook Academy of Music. Janitor needed. Night shift. She took the job without thinking twice. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe it was a form of torture. To spend every night surrounded by the things she loved most, but could never have again. To hear students practicing through the walls. To watch young people chase the same dreams she once had. To stand in front of that beautiful piano and know that her fingers had forgotten how to make it sing. Or had they? Sometimes, late at night, when she was absolutely sure she was alone, Mei Lin would sit on the piano bench. She would lift the lid and look at the white and black keys stretching out before her like an old friend she had not seen in decades. She would raise her hands, letting them hover just above the surface, and then she would stop. Every single time, she would stop. She would close the lid, pick up her mop, and go back to work. Because the past was the past. Because she was just a cleaning lady now. Because dreams were for young people with their whole lives ahead of them, not for tired old women with nothing left to give. At least, that was what she told herself. But deep down, in a place she tried hard not to visit, the music was still there, waiting, patient, like a seed buried in winter soil, waiting for the first touch of spring. She just did not know that spring was coming. She did not know that in just 3 weeks, her entire life would change because of one snowstorm, one missing pianist, and one moment of courage that had been building inside her for 40 years. She did not know any of that yet. For now, she was just Mei Lin, the invisible woman, the cleaning lady with the blue bucket and the worn sneakers. And tonight, like every other night, she stood in front of the grand piano, looked at her reflection in its shiny black surface, and wondered what her life might have been like if things had been different. Then she picked up her mop and got back to work. The snow started falling on a Thursday afternoon in December. At first, it was light and pretty, the kind of snow that makes children press their faces against windows and beg to go outside. But by evening, it had turned into something else entirely. The wind picked up. The flakes grew thick and heavy. Within hours, the roads were covered in white, and the city began to shut down. But inside the Westbrook Academy of Music, nobody was thinking about the weather. Tonight was the Winter Gala, the biggest event of the year. This was the night when wealthy donors wrote big checks, when famous alumni came back to shake hands and take pictures, when the Academy showed off its best and brightest to remind everyone why this place mattered. Mei Lin had been asked to come in early to help prepare. She spent the afternoon polishing silver, arranging flowers, and setting up tables covered in white cloth. The recital hall had been transformed into something out of a fairy tale. Candles flickered on every surface. The chandeliers sparkled like diamonds. The grand piano sat on stage, polished to perfection, waiting for the star of the evening. His name was Jun Wei, a 26-year-old pianist who had graduated from the academy 5 years ago. Since then, he had performed in concert halls across Europe and Asia. He had won awards. He had been on magazine covers. He was exactly the kind of success story the Academy loved to show off. Tonight, he was supposed to play a 30-minute set that would leave the donors reaching for their checkbooks. There was just one problem. Junwei was stuck at the airport, 50 miles away, watching the snow pile up outside his window. Mei Lin was in the back corner of the recital hall when she first heard the whispers. She was adjusting a tablecloth that had gotten crooked, trying to stay out of everyone's way, when two women in expensive dresses walked past her. "Did you hear? The pianist cannot make it. His flight is grounded." "You are joking. What are they going to do?" "I have no idea." "The dean looks like he is about to have a heart attack." Mei Lin kept her head down and continued working. It was not her business. She was just the cleaning lady. Whatever problems the rich people had, they would figure it out. They always did. But as the minutes passed, the panic in the room grew. She could see it in the way people huddled together in small groups, speaking in urgent tones. She could see it in the way the dean kept checking his phone, his face getting redder each time. She could hear it in the nervous laughter that rippled through the crowd as more and more guests arrived, expecting a show that might not happen. The dean was a tall man with silver hair and a suit that probably cost more than Mei Lin made in a month. His name was Dr. Harrison, and he had run the academy for 15 years. He was used to being in control, used to having answers. But tonight, he had neither. She watched him pace back and forth near the stage, talking to his assistant in a low voice. His hands were shaking slightly. The clock on the wall showed 7:45. The performance was supposed to start at 8. "Can anyone else play?" his assistant asked. "Who?" "Our students are good, but they are not ready for this. These donors expect a professional performance. We cannot put some nervous teenager up there." "What about Professor Hendricks? He broke his wrist last month. Cannot play a note." The assistant looked around the room helplessly. "Then, what do we do?" Dr. Harrison ran a hand through his silver hair. For a moment, he looked like a man who had run out of options. Then, something shifted in his face. A desperate idea. A last resort. He stepped up onto the small platform near the stage and cleared his throat. The room gradually fell silent. All eyes turned to him. "Good evening, everyone," he said, forcing a smile. "Thank you all for being here tonight. As some of you may have heard, our featured performer is experiencing some travel difficulties due to the weather. We expect him to arrive shortly, but in the meantime, I thought we might have a bit of fun." He paused, looking around the room with what he probably hoped was a charming expression. "We are surrounded by music lovers tonight. Surely someone in this room can entertain us with a piece or two while we wait. Any volunteers?" Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. People looked at each other, shaking their heads, taking small steps backward. Nobody wanted to follow a world-famous pianist. Nobody wanted to embarrass themselves in front of the city's wealthiest donors. Mei Lin stood frozen in her corner. Her heart had started beating faster, though she did not understand why. This had nothing to do with her. She was invisible. She was nobody. She should finish straightening the tablecloth and go check on the refreshment table. But her feet would not move. And her hands. Her hands had started to tremble. Not from fear. From something else. Something that had been sleeping inside her for 40 years and was suddenly, inexplicably, waking up. Dr. Harrison's smile was starting to look strained. "Come now. Surely we have some talented guests tonight. Anyone? It does not have to be perfect. Just something to pass the time." More silence, more nervous glances. Someone coughed. And then, before she even knew what she was doing, Mei Lin heard her own voice. "I can try." The words came out quiet, almost a whisper. But in that silent room, they carried like a shout. Every head turned toward the corner where she stood. The cleaning lady, the invisible woman, still holding a corner of the tablecloth in her worn hands. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Mei Lin could feel their eyes on her, taking in her simple uniform. Her gray hair pulled back in a messy bun. Her face lined with age and hard work. She could see the confusion, the disbelief. A few people even smiled, like they thought it was a joke. Dr. Harrison stared at her for a long moment. She could see him calculating, weighing his options. On one hand, this was ridiculous. On the other hand, he had nothing else. "I am sorry," he said, his voice polite but distant. "Mei-Lin, I cleaned the building." Someone in the crowd laughed. Not a mean laugh, exactly, but the kind of laugh that comes when something unexpected happens and you do not know how else to react. Other people joined in. Soon, half the room was chuckling softly. Mei-Lin felt her face grow warm. What was she doing? Why had she opened her mouth? She should apologize. She should disappear back into her corner and pretend this never happened. But something inside her would not let her back down. Something stubborn and fierce that she thought had died a long time ago. She looked at Dr. Harrison and said nothing. Just waited. He glanced at his assistant, who shrugged helplessly. He looked at the clock. 7:52. He looked at the crowd. Still waiting, still expecting something. Finally, he turned back to Mei-Lin and gestured toward the stage with a small wave of his hand. The gesture was dismissive, patronizing, the kind of gesture you give when you are already planning your apology for what comes next. "Well then," he said, "by all means. The stage is yours." The crowd parted as Mei-Lin walked forward. She could hear the whispers following her like shadows. "Is this a joke? The cleaning lady? Really? This should be interesting." She climbed the 3 small steps to the stage. The spotlight felt warm on her face. The piano sat there waiting, just like it did every night when she stood before it in the darkness. But tonight was different. Tonight, people were watching. Tonight, the lid was already open. Tonight, the keys were waiting for her like old friends she had not spoken to in decades. She sat down on the bench. The leather was cool beneath her. She placed her hands in her lap and took a deep breath. The room had gone completely silent. Not the respectful silence of anticipation, but the awkward silence of people waiting for something embarrassing to happen. Mei-Lin closed her eyes. And somewhere deep inside her, a door that had been locked for 40 years began to open. The silence in the room was heavy. The kind of silence that presses against your ears and makes you aware of every tiny sound. The rustle of expensive fabric as someone shifted their weight, the soft clink of ice in a glass, the distant howl of wind outside the windows. Mei-Lin sat at the piano with her eyes still closed. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers slightly curled, like they were holding onto something invisible. She could feel the weight of all those eyes on her back. She could feel the doubt in the room, thick as smoke. What was she doing here? What had she been thinking? For a moment, panic rose in her chest like cold water. 40 years. It had been 40 years since she had played for anyone. Her fingers were not the same. Her hands were rough from years of scrubbing floors and wringing out mops. She was not the young prodigy from Shanghai anymore. She was just an old cleaning lady who had made a fool of herself in front of the richest people in the city. She should stand up. She should apologize. She should walk off this stage and disappear into the night and never come back. But then something strange happened. In the darkness behind her closed eyes, she saw her mother. Not the frail woman who had spent her final years in a tiny apartment, coughing and fading away, but the young mother from her childhood, the one with bright eyes and gentle hands, the one who had stood behind her at that old upright piano in Shanghai, guiding her fingers to the right keys. She heard her mother's voice, soft as a whisper. "Play, little one, play." Mei-Lin opened her eyes. The piano keys stretched out before her, white and black, familiar and foreign all at once. She raised her hands slowly. They were trembling. She could see the slight shake in her fingers, and she knew everyone else could see it too. Someone in the crowd coughed. Someone else whispered something that might have been a joke. She heard a quiet laugh. Quickly stifled, she placed her fingers on the keys. The ivory was cool against her skin. Smooth. Perfect. For a moment, she just held them there, feeling the weight of the instrument beneath her hands, feeling the possibility. Then she began to play. The first note was soft, almost too soft. It floated into the air like a single drop of rain falling into a still pond. The second note followed. Then the third. They were hesitant at first, uncertain, like the steps of someone learning to walk again after a long illness. But then something shifted. It was like watching a flower bloom in fast motion. One moment, there were just scattered notes hanging in the air. The next moment, there was music. Real music. The kind that reaches into your chest and grabs hold of your heart. Mei Lin was playing Chopin. The Ballade. No. 1-inch G. Minor. One of the most difficult and beautiful pieces ever written for piano. It was the same piece she had played on her last night in Shanghai, 40 years ago. The same piece she had whispered goodbye to. And now it was coming back to her. Her fingers moved across the keys like they had never stopped. Like the 40 years of silence had been nothing but a brief pause. A held breath before the next phrase. The muscle memory was still there, buried deep in her bones. The music was still there, waiting in her blood. The opening melody was gentle and sad, like a story being told in a language that needed no words. It spoke of loss, of longing, of all the things we carry with us, even when we think we have let them go. In the audience, something was changing. The whispers stopped. The smirks faded. One by one, the expressions on people's faces shifted from amusement to confusion to something else entirely. Something like wonder. A woman in a red dress had been raising her wine glass to her lips. Now the glass hung frozen in midair. Forgotten. A man who had been checking his phone slipped it back into his pocket without looking away from the stage. Dr. Harrison, who had been prepared to make an apologetic announcement, stood with his mouth slightly open, unable to move. Mei Lin did not see any of this. Her eyes were focused on the keys. But she was not really seeing them either. She was somewhere else entirely. She was back in Shanghai, in that small apartment with the chipped piano and the thin walls. She was playing for her mother. She was playing for her father, wherever he was. She was playing for the girl she used to be and the woman she had become. The music built slowly, like a wave gathering strength far out at sea. The melody grew more complex, more demanding. Her left hand danced across the bass notes, while her right hand sang out the theme. The two hands wove together, separating and reuniting, telling a story of heartbreak and hope. Somewhere in the middle of the piece, Mei Lin felt tears on her cheeks. She did not try to wipe them away. She let them fall, let them become part of the music. The audience was no longer a collection of wealthy strangers. They were just people. Human beings caught in the spell of something beautiful. Some of them were crying too, though they could not have explained why. Others sat perfectly still, barely breathing, afraid that any movement might break the magic. A professor of music theory, a man who had taught at the academy for 20 years and had heard thousands of performances, leaned forward in his seat. His hands were gripping his knees so hard his knuckles had turned white. He had studied this piece for decades. He had heard it played by some of the greatest pianists in the world, but he had never heard it played like this. Not with this much raw emotion. Not with this much soul. Who was this woman? Where had she come from? How was this possible? The questions swirled in his mind, but he pushed them away. Questions could wait. Right now, there was only the music. Mei Lin reached the stormy middle section of the piece. Her fingers flew across the keys with a speed and precision that seemed impossible for hands that had spent years holding mops and scrub brushes. The notes tumbled over each other like water rushing over rocks. The melody soared and crashed and soared again. She was not just playing the music. She was living it. Every phrase was a chapter of her life. The joy of her childhood. The terror of losing her father. The grief of leaving her homeland. The long gray years of survival and silence. And underneath it all, the stubborn flame of hope that had never quite gone out. The music swelled to its climax. The final passages were thunderous, demanding, pushing both the piano and the pianist to their absolute limits. Mei Lin's whole body moved with the rhythm. Her shoulders, her head, her feet pressing the pedals with perfect timing. And then, just as suddenly as it had erupted, the storm began to calm. The final section of the ballade is quiet, gentle. After all the passion and fury, it ends with a simple, heartbreaking melody that fades away like a dream you cannot quite hold on to. Mei Lin played these final notes with her eyes closed again. Her touch was feather-light now. Each note hung in the air for a moment, before dissolving into silence. The last chord was soft as a sigh, and then there was nothing. Mei Lin sat motionless, her hands still resting on the keys. She was breathing hard. Her heart was pounding. The tears had dried on her cheeks, leaving faint tracks like rivers on a map. For 3 long seconds, the room was absolutely silent. No one moved. No one spoke. No one even seemed to breathe. Then the woman in the red dress let out a small sound. It might have been a gasp. It might have been a sob. It was hard to tell. And then the room exploded. The applause hit her like a wave. It started with 1 person, then 2, then 10. Then the entire room was on its feet, clapping so hard it sounded like thunder rolling through the hall. The crystal chandeliers seemed to shake with the force of it. The candles on the tables flickered in the sudden movement of air. Mei Lin sat frozen at the piano, her hands still resting on the keys. She did not understand what was happening. For a moment, she thought something had gone wrong. Maybe she had made a terrible mistake. Maybe they were clapping out of pity, the way you might clap for a child who tried their best but failed. But then she looked up, and she saw their faces. The woman in the red dress was crying openly, tears streaming down her cheeks without shame. An older man in the front row had his hand pressed against his chest, like he was trying to hold his heart in place. A young couple near the back was holding each other, swaying slightly, as if the music had left them too weak to stand on their own. These were not polite smiles. These were not pity claps. These people looked like they had just witnessed something they would never forget. Dr. Harrison pushed through the crowd toward the stage. His face had gone pale. His hands were trembling. When he reached the steps, he stopped and just stared at her, his mouth opening and closing like he wanted to say something, but could not find the words. Finally, he managed to speak. His voice came out rough, broken. "Who are you?" It was not an accusation. It was not suspicion. It was genuine wonder. The kind of question a person asks when they have just seen something impossible. Mei Lin looked at him. Her own voice felt strange in her throat, like it belonged to someone else. "I told you, I am the cleaning lady." A laugh rippled through the crowd. But it was different from before. It was warm now. Affectionate. The kind of laugh that comes when you realize you have been part of something special. The applause continued. It showed no sign of stopping. People were calling out, shouting things she could not quite hear over the noise. Someone was whistling. Someone else was stamping their feet. Mei Lin did not know what to do. She had not expected any of this. She had not expected anything at all. She had just wanted to play. Just once. Just to remember what it felt like. Slowly, shakily, she stood up from the bench. Her legs felt weak beneath her. The spotlight was too bright, too hot. She needed to get off this stage. She needed to find somewhere quiet where she could breathe. But before she could take a step, a hand caught her arm. She turned to find the professor of music theory standing beside her, the one who had been gripping his knees during her performance. His eyes were red. His cheeks were wet. "Please," he said. "Please. Do not leave. You have to tell us. Where did you study? Who taught you to play like that?" The questions came from everywhere now. People were pressing closer to the stage, reaching out like they wanted to touch her. Like she was something precious they were afraid might disappear. "How long have you been playing? Why are you working here as a cleaner? What is your name? Your real name?" Mei Lin felt overwhelmed. The noise, the lights, the faces. It was too much. She had spent 11 years being invisible, and now suddenly everyone could see her. Everyone wanted something from her. She took a step back, bumping into the piano bench. Her chest felt tight, and then a voice cut through the chaos. Calm, clear, commanding. "Give her some space, please." The crowd parted, and an elderly woman stepped forward. She was small and thin, with white hair pinned up in an elegant style. Her dress was simple, but expensive. Her eyes were sharp and knowing. Mei Lin recognized her. Everyone in the classical music world would recognize her. Her name was Dr. Florence Chen, and she was one of the most respected music critics in the country. She had written for major publications for over 40 years. A good review from her could make a career. A bad review could end one. Dr. Chen walked slowly toward the stage, her heels clicking against the floor. She stopped at the edge of the stage and looked up at Mei Lin. For a long moment, she said nothing. She just studied her, those sharp eyes taking in every detail. The worn uniform, the rough hands, the tear-stained cheeks. Then she spoke. Her voice was soft, but in the silence, everyone heard. Chopin's First Ballade. I have heard that piece performed by the greatest pianists of the last 50 years. Rubinstein, Zimmermann, Kissin. She paused, letting the names hang in the air. None of them played it the way you just did. Mei Lin did not know how to respond. She felt like she was dreaming, like none of this was real. Dr. Chen continued. That piece is not just about technique. Any talented student can learn the notes, but to play it with that kind of emotional truth, that kind of lived experience. She shook her head slowly. That cannot be taught. That can only come from a life that has known real joy and real sorrow. She reached into her small purse and pulled out a business card. She held it up toward the stage. I do not know who you are or what your story is, but I would very much like to find out. Please, call me. Mei Lin reached down and took the card. Her fingers were still trembling. The small piece of paper felt impossibly heavy in her hand. Around her, the whispers had started again. But they were different now. They were not mocking. They were amazed, curious, excited. Dr. Harrison stepped forward again. His earlier dismissiveness was completely gone. In its place was something that looked almost like shame. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. I have walked past you 100 times in these halls, and I never once stopped to see you, to really see you. He swallowed hard. I am sorry. Mei Lin looked at him. This man, who had ignored her for 11 years. This man, who had let her onto the stage expecting her to fail. She could have been angry. She could have been bitter, but she was neither. You did not know, she said simply. Nobody knew. I did not want them to. The truth of those words settled over her like a blanket. For 40 years, she had hidden herself away. She had buried her gift so deep that she had almost convinced herself it did not exist anymore. She had been so afraid of hoping, so afraid of wanting, that she had made herself small and invisible. But tonight, something had changed. Tonight, the music had come back. And with it, something else. Something she had not felt in decades. Possibility. The applause had finally faded, but the energy in the room had not. People were still watching her, still waiting to see what she would do next. Mei Lin looked out at the sea of faces. Then she looked down at the piano, still waiting for her on the stage. And for the first time in 40 years, she smiled. The snow had finally stopped falling outside. But inside the recital hall, the night was far from over. Mei Lin was still standing on stage, unsure of what to do next, when the main doors at the back of the hall swung open. A gust of cold air rushed in, carrying snowflakes that melted the moment they touched the warm floor. And through those doors walked a young man in a long black coat, pulling a small suitcase behind him. Jun Wei had finally arrived. He stopped just inside the entrance, shaking snow from his hair, ready to apologize for being late. But something was wrong. The room felt different. Charged. Electric. Everyone was standing. Everyone was looking toward the stage. And on that stage, instead of an empty piano waiting for him, there was an older woman in a cleaning uniform, surrounded by people who looked like they had just witnessed a miracle. Junwei frowned. He walked forward slowly, trying to understand what he had missed. Dr. Harrison spotted him and hurried over. The dean's face was flushed, his eyes wide with an excitement that seemed completely out of place. "You made it," Dr. Harrison said, grabbing his hand and shaking it vigorously. "You have to hear about what just happened. You will not believe it." Junwei listened as the dean spoke in rapid, breathless sentences. The missing performer. The desperate request for a volunteer. The cleaning lady, who had stepped forward. The performance that had left the entire room in tears. When Dr. Harrison finished, Junwei stood very still. He looked past the dean toward the stage, where Mei Lin was now sitting on the edge of the platform, surrounded by a small group of people who were listening to her speak. "Chopin's first ballade?" he asked quietly. "Yes, the whole thing. From memory. Flawless." Junwei did not say anything else. He set down his suitcase and walked toward the stage. The crowd parted for him, recognizing who he was. Whispers followed him, but he did not hear them. His eyes were fixed on the woman in the worn uniform. Mei Lin looked up as he approached. She did not know who he was. She saw only a young man with kind eyes and snow still melting in his dark hair. Junwei stopped in front of her and bowed his head slightly. It was a gesture of respect. The kind of bow a student gives to a master. "I heard what you did tonight," he said. "I am sorry I was not here to witness it myself." Mei Lin shook her head. "There is nothing to be sorry for. The snow was not your fault." Junwei smiled. "No, but missing your performance, that I will regret for a long time." He paused, seeming to consider something. Then he looked at her with a question in his eyes. "I know this is unusual, but would you consider playing with me tonight? A duet. Right now. A word. A word other matter. Like the worder. Right now. Like the worder. A worder other matter. A worder other matter. A worder other matter." The crowd gasped. Mei Lin's eyes went wide. "With you?" "You are not just anything," Junwei said firmly. "I do not know your story yet, but I know what I have seen in this room tonight. These people are still shaking. Whatever you played, it was not just music. It was something more." He held out his hand toward her. "Please, it would be my honor." Mei Lin stared at his hand. Her mind was spinning. This was too much. Too fast. An hour ago, she had been invisible. Now, a world-famous pianist was asking her to perform beside him. She thought about saying no. She thought about all the reasons why this was a bad idea. She was tired. She was overwhelmed. She had not practiced in decades. What if the first performance had been a fluke? What if she failed this time? But then she looked out at the audience. She saw the woman in the red dress, still dabbing at her eyes. She saw the elderly music critic, watching her with that sharp, knowing gaze. She saw Dr. Harrison, who had once looked right through her, and now could not look away. And she saw something else, too. In the back of the room, standing alone near the door, there was a young girl, maybe 12 or 13 years old, probably the daughter of one of the donors. She was wearing a simple dress, and her eyes were locked on Mei Lin with an expression of pure wonder. That look. Mei Lin recognized it. She had worn that same look once, a lifetime ago, when she had first discovered what music could do. She took Junwei's hand and stood up. The crowd erupted in cheers. They walked to the piano together. Junwei sat on the left side of the bench. Mei Lin sat on the right. It was strange, sharing this space with a stranger. But somehow, it also felt right. "Do you know Schubert's Fantasy in F minor?" Junwei asked quietly. Mei Lin almost laughed. It was one of the most beautiful duets ever written. She had played it with her mother once, long ago, on that old upright piano in Shanghai. She had not thought about it in years. "I know it," she said. Junwei nodded. He placed his hands on the keys. She placed hers beside them, and they began to play. The fantasy in F minor is a conversation. Two voices weaving together, separating, reuniting. It is tender and passionate, gentle and fierce. It requires two pianists who can listen to each other, breathe with each other, feel what the other is feeling without a single word. Mei Lin and Junwei had never met before tonight. They had never practiced together. They had never even heard each other play. But somehow, they understood each other perfectly. Their hands danced across the keys in perfect harmony. When one voice rose, the other fell. When one paused, the other filled the silence. It was like watching two rivers merge into one, separate streams becoming a single, powerful flow. The audience sat in stunned silence. Some of them had stopped breathing. The beauty of it was almost too much to bear. Mei Lin played with her eyes closed. She was not thinking about the notes anymore. She was not thinking about the audience, or the critics, or the dean who had once ignored her. She was just feeling the music move through her like blood. Feeling the connection with this young stranger beside her. Feeling, for the first time in 40 years, completely alive. When the final notes faded into silence, nobody moved. Then the young girl in the back of the room started clapping. Her small hands made a soft, rapid sound that cut through the quiet. One by one, others joined her. The applause built and built until it was thunderous, deafening. A wall of sound that shook the chandeliers and rattled the windows. Junwei turned to Mei Lin. His eyes were wet. "Thank you," he said. "That was the most beautiful thing I have ever played." Mei Lin could not speak. She just nodded, tears streaming down her own face. Later that night, after the gala had ended and the guests had gone home, Mei Lin sat alone in the empty recital hall. The lights were dimmed. The candles had been blown out. The grand piano sat silent on the stage. She had Dr. Florence Chen's business card in her pocket. She had received 3 offers to teach at prestigious music schools. A journalist had asked to write her story. A documentary filmmaker had given her his number. But none of that mattered right now. What mattered was this. She had played again. After 40 years of silence, she had found her voice. And no matter what happened next, no one could ever take that away from her. She stood up, grabbed her blue bucket and her mop, and began to clean the hall. But as she worked, she was humming, a simple melody, something her mother used to sing, and on her face, there was a smile that would not fade. The music had come home, and so had she.